I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Old Bridge Planning Board. If you'd all please stand and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. On to-
Okay. Adequate notice of this meeting of the Old Bridge Township Planning Board has been provided in accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act at least 48 hours prior to the commencement of the meeting by one, prominently posting in the municipal complex an announcement giving the time, date, location, and agenda of this meeting, two, mailing such announcement to the Home News and Tribune, and three, filing a copy of such announcement with the municipal clerk.
Mr. Pasquini? Mr. Lauer?
Here.
Mr. Mackes?
Here.
Mr. Schmitz?
Here.
Mr. Murphy?
Here.
Mr. Pink?
Here.
Mr. Luca?
Here.
Chairman Cannon?
Here.
Ms. Carey?
Here.
Ms. Wong? Ms. Shapiro? Mr. Doty? Ms. Strong?
Okay, I just want to remind everybody that we're being televised, and I don't know if we're going off at 10 o'clock or not. I think, do you know if we're going off at 10? No. Okay, so we're going off at 10. At that, the planning board meeting may not be over by then, but that's when the cameras will shut down. So the first thing we have is the planning board meeting scheduled for 2019. Did everybody get a chance to check that out? Anybody have any problems? Any problems? Okay, do we have to approve that? Or, okay, can we have a motion to approve the planning board schedule for 2019?
I'll move it.
Moved by Mr. Schmidt,
I'll second.
seconded by Mr. Marucci. Roll call, please.
Abstain.
Mr. Lauer?
Yes.
Mr. Mackes?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Pink?
Yes.
Mr. Luca?
Yes.
Chairman Cannon?
Yes. Okay, we have application 17-18P, Route 516 Development LLC, major site plan preliminary and final with C variances.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Salvatore Alfieri, Cleary, Giacobbe, Alfieri, and Jacobs on behalf of the applicant. We were here 2 months ago, started our testimony. We presented Mr. Lang, our engineer, and our architect, Mr. Dietz. We heard comments from the board members, some of the members of the public, and the board professionals. Since that time, we have revised the plans to try and address many of the comments that we heard that night. Mr. Lang, although we finished his testimony last meeting, we're going to bring him back up so that he can explain the changes that have been made and comment on the new report that we received from the board professionals. And do you re-swear him?
You remain under oath.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Lang, would you just summarize for
Before
the...
we start, I just want to explain again to the public that we're going to, I guess, are you going to go through all your professionals in dealing with the revisions?
Yeah, we have Mr. Lang, and then we have a traffic engineer who will be here shortly, and then we have our landscape architect planner, and that's it.
Okay, so like we did last time, after each testimony by the witness, our professional staff will ask any questions or have any comments they have, then the board, and then we'll open it to the public. And at this time, the public will just be commenting on the testimony that's been given by the professional. And you'll have a chance at the end, when the application is complete, to offer opinions and so forth. But right now, it's just commenting or questioning any of its testimony.
Thank you. Mr. Lang, would you summarize for the board the changes that were made to the plan since the last hearing?
Certainly. So we've been diligently working with your professionals in the interim, and that included a joint meeting with the county engineering department and planning department to kind of go over how the site would fit not only on the property, but also relative to the roadways surrounding, particularly 516. So as part of that meeting, we discussed several things. One, we discussed the site triangle easement. Right now, there's an existing site triangle easement that kind of cuts off the corner of the site. The county has agreed that that easement is not necessary, it is not consistent with current standards, and essentially indicated they would be willing to swap that easement for a more typical AASHTO site triangle easement. This is a signalized intersection, and that would be totally appropriate. So we have that agreement in principle. Two, we also looked at the driveway entrances on 516. You may recall that Ms. Shapiro indicated to the board last time that the county park or county township park would have a driveway somewhere in the middle across the street of our frontage. However, that offsets the driveways. It also create some difficulties with left turn movements. So what we worked out at that joint meeting was the township would move that driveway down essentially to the east, lining it up with our easterly most driveway. And then we, the applicant, would then widen 516 to achieve a total width of 42 feet, paved width. And that's about a 4-foot widening, depends where you're on the road, but it's roughly 4 feet. That would be the entire Cottrell Farms frontage that we would be making that widening. And what we would do then is stripe dedicated left turn lanes both into the subject site, the applicant's site, as well as into the future township/county park. And that way we've got a nice 4-way intersection. We're back from the traffic signal, and we have good movements to both uses. In terms of moving now into the site, another change has been made. Building B was originally a 2-story building. There was about 4,500 square feet of retail or kind of general space plan for that. That has been removed from the application. So again, 4,500 square feet has been deducted from the application. That gives us a new grand total of 34,525 square feet of gross floor area, and that does include the 3 outdoor patios that are on the plan, which total 1,955 feet, plus or minus. As part of that Building B change, removing the leasable or usable area from the second floor, that also allowed the architect to reduce the building height. So we have eliminated the height variance from Building B as part of that change. With that square footage reduction, the required parking under the town center ordinance is reduced from 124 stalls to 115. And then in addition to that, we were at the last hearing, we were at 133 parking stalls. We are now at 139 parking stalls constructed and another 3 land banked as tandem parking stalls. Now those tandem stalls would require a design waiver, and the idea obviously would be that those would be employee type parking stalls and would be banked and available if that made sense at some point in the future. And those are located over on the south end of Building A. So that gives us a total of constructed spaces, 24 more than required by the ordinance, and if you include the bank spaces, 27 more than required by the ordinance. Another significant change was the driveway out to Thames. The driveway was always in this general location, so that's not what's changed, but what has changed is the driveway is now one way, so it is a one-way out. It only heads to the south. And then in addition to that, it only has one turning movement, which is a right out toward Cottrell. So the only movement you can make through this driveway is an exiting movement and only as a right turn heading westbound on Thames out to Cottrell. Moving now into some of the parking around Building D. You may recall that we originally had some parking spaces in the rear of that building, and we had some angled parking spaces and a narrower one-way driveway on the north side. We have kind of flipped that, eliminated the parking on the east side, moved it to the north side, made those parking stalls perpendicular, and widened the drive aisle there to 24 feet. A couple other changes. We've moved the refuse enclosure that was originally, it's still generally on the south end of Building A, but originally it was on our easterly property line. We have now moved that to the west to be on the other side of the parking lot. basically where this elbow is here at the southerly corner of Building A. The other refuse enclosure that we moved was the one serving Buildings B and C. That was previously located directly opposite the westerly-most driveway on 516. We have moved that now to the east, over to the easterly corner of Building B. And you'll see that it's angled, kind of angled toward the northwest, and then the refuse vehicles can circulate to access that spot. We've also updated the bike and walkway design along 516 to match that was done across the street in the other development to the west of us. So it's actually not compliant with the town center ordinance, but now matches what's already constructed across the street. Overall, everything is there. The elements are there. They've just been shuffled to match across the street at your board professionals' requests. We have changed the type of retaining wall that's allowed us to add some of this additional parking. We are now showing a driven vinyl sheet pile wall, and that allows us to have a much narrower area between the edge of the wall and the freshwater wetlands because it doesn't require construction staging on the downhill side. In terms of the stormwater, we've reworked that quite a bit. Perhaps one of the most obvious things, there used to be a detention basin located in the southwesterly portion of the site at the intersection of Thames and Cottrell. That has been eliminated altogether. In its place, we still have 4 stormwater systems. The first is similar to what was there before. It's a storm trap, double trap unit, 6.5 feet tall. There are 8 of those. The next one is located roughly where Basin 2 used to be, but instead of it being a storm trap vault, it is now a 30-inch diameter perforated high-density polyethylene pipe in a stone bed. There are 4 130-foot-long pipes. Area 3 is again in the same similar location, 7 units, 5 feet 8 inches of the storm trap, single trap units. And then we added a rain garden up in between buildings B and C, right along Route 516, and that is collecting runoff from that surrounding area. In terms of the approach, the rain garden I just described is getting these patio areas. The perforated stone system is taking the roof area from Building C and approximately half of Building B. Then the remainder is going to the 2 storm trap systems and an upflow water quality filter or manufactured treatment device to meet both the quantity and quality requirements. In terms of groundwater recharge, as I previously testified, the site is mostly exempt except for this portion of the site, which is in the kind of the center of the frontage on 516, where we did get some better soil testing, and that's why we have the rain garden and the perforated pipe in those locations. However, both have been designed to completely exclude infiltration, so in the event it does an infiltration, it would not affect the quantity control aspects of the design. So that's the summary of the changes. I have had an opportunity to review the most recent letters from the board's professionals, and for the most part, we don't take any exception. There's just a few minor comments that I'll run through real quickly. So I'm going to start with the September 28, 2018 second review from the township planner and the township engineer. First thing I want to just call your attention is on page 9. It's item 6C. There's a request here, the applicant should testify if it is an outdoor use or outdoor dining. This has to do with the area on the north side of Building D. And the reason that's unclear is because it will depend on the tenant. Depending on what kind of use goes in here will drive whether or not that space, or how that space, I really should say, is utilized. It could be a general outdoor use, it could be outdoor dining, or if a restaurant were to go in here that had a more intensive drive-through operation, it could actually become the pickup window area, and that would substantially lengthen the overall drive-through lane, if that were to be the direction that tenant goes. So that has been designed with some flexibility, and that's why it's a little bit unclear at this time. The next item has to do on page 12 There's a full parking analysis. The one issue I want to call to your attention, which I think Sal is going to address, has to do with the parking and some language having to do with the amount of parking required.
Yeah, we've been working with the board professionals to come up with language to address and limit the restaurant space located within the center, and we're getting close. I don't know if we're exactly there yet, so we need, I don't know how to address it tonight. Well, hopefully we can. The issue we have is that it appears as if we've agreed in principle that there would be no more than 10,500 square feet of restaurant space out of the 35,000 square feet. But in that 35,000 square feet is 1,900 and change of those outdoor seating areas. The concern, the applicant, instead of making the buildings larger and not have outdoor seating, they thought that the most attractive approach and to be more consistent with the intent of your ordinance was to have these outdoor seating areas. They may be restaurant space, they may be just areas where people congregate, but there would not be permanent seating where they'll be inside, they'll be seasonal. So the applicant is concerned that if tables are there, that 1,950 square feet would be considered part of the restaurant space, and my client's not renting that space. It's really open to the users. And so they're losing rentable space by not putting building there, and they could potentially be penalized by not having the restaurant square footage. So we've attempted to come up with language, and we're getting closer. Our preference is to just exclude the outdoor seating space from the calculations. We're far over the ordinance requirements. There's other parking metrics that are reflected in this report. But our preference is to exclude that area unless it becomes non-seasonal seating, meaning we put a roof over it and heaters and enclose it. But if it's open seating, we're hoping that the board and the board professionals understand that that should not be counted towards the 10,500 square feet. Other than that, we've agreed on all the language with your board professionals. And we haven't had an opportunity to discuss this any further than that one issue with the outdoor seating. So, and we can get back to that and however you want to handle it tonight, but that's our only issue. Otherwise, we're in good shape with parking.
And to pick back up in the letter on page 13, it's item 9D, although the 9 is a couple pages back. The comment here requests testimony regarding the ingress pattern for cars at the two driveways on 516. There are a couple, or more than a couple really, of key things to consider. One, because of the town center design, we don't have the typical just 4-foot sidewalk. There is actually a fairly deep driveway throat until you get to the right-of-way line. So that, by its very nature, sets the parking back. Secondly, in this area along this frontage, there are not obstructions to sight distance. There are no large wooded areas. Everything here is being built or engineered in accordance with the town center standards. So the lines of sight are certainly appropriate. Another important factor, the parking is only located on one side of the driveway. It's not on both sides. And of particular importance, it's on the exiting side. So you'll see in both cases, on both driveways, it's on the right or east side, which is the exiting movement. So it would not interfere with inbound traffic, or certainly if it did, it would be a very temporal situation. So with all that said, the fact it's a relatively small shopping center, and by extension a low-volume traffic generator, we feel this is an appropriate design for these two driveways. So hopefully that addresses the request for some testimony. Then on page 15, there's a question here as to whether or not a flagpole will be part of the project. The simple answer is no, it will not be. And then there's another item on page 17. This is a landscaping issue, and Mr. Ray Liotta, who is the landscape architect, will address that as part of his testimony. On page 20, this notes the vinyl sheet piling that I spoke to, and it's requesting a full design of the walls. We'll absolutely intend to do that, although we would like that to be a resolution compliance item, just to make sure that we have the final layout of the walls before we go through the effort of doing the structural design. But we have looked at it. We've reviewed it with our structural department as well as with the storm trap manufacturer, and both are convinced that we can make the walls and the storm trap units work in a structurally sound fashion. And of course, that would be subject to the board's professional review, once we submit that as part of any favorable resolution. In terms of the, on page 21, item I, there's a question regarding turning templates for the trash trucks. We have looked at significantly, and I know it's not shown this way on the submission, it was a mistake. The trash trucks are supposed to be front-loading, though, so in other words, the front of the truck will go into the refuse area and then pick up the dumpster with the forks, put it over the top of the cab, as is the typical use. So I have rerun those auto-turn analysis to make sure all of that works, and they do, in fact, work at each location, and we can, of course, supply that as part of any favorable resolution. And then on that same page, item L, there's a new comment having to do with the depth of the backup area at the edge of the easterly edge of the parking lot just south of Building A, and that is 5 feet deep. The LDO requires 10 feet, and we are seeking a waiver for that, and we believe that it's appropriate in that location. And that's the only comments or discussion I had on that letter. And then the other letter is dated October 1st, 2018, from Environmental Resolutions, Inc. Looking at page 205, comment number 2, we have no problem putting in the 5x5 ADA passing area, but that is in a DEP-regulated area. So long as DEP will issue us the permit for it, we'll be more than happy to construct the 5x5. I don't believe it'll be a problem. It should be a relatively routine, knock on wood, permit for the DEP, but I just wanted to put that on the record that it is a regulated area. And then skipping to page 4 or 5, note 17 has to do with the number of cars between the menu board and the pickup window. And this is a highly variable design component. It really depends on the end user. So the way it's laid out now would be a more low-intensity drive-in use. If it was a higher-intensity drive-in use, then the pickup window would move from the easterly facade and come around to the northerly facade, and that would significantly lengthen up the entire drive-through operation. I'm not sure how to
And
address that.
the applicant would agree that once a tenant is identified for that spot, they would meet with your board professionals, and if they agree on the design and location, then we're okay, and if not, we'd have to come back to the board.
And then the final comment has to, again, on page 4 or 5, has to do with the delivery truck for Building D. There is a possibility, again, depending on the end user, that could be a small tractor trailer. We looked at up to a WB40 delivery truck and are satisfied that the truck can come eastbound on Route 516, enter the development at the central driveway, circulate around, past the loading zone, back into it, and then pull back out onto Cottrell up to the signal and be able to return westbound, which is the anticipated route of travel should a vehicle of that size be necessary. So that concludes my comments on the review letters, and at this point, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Okay, Nina? Good evening. I'll just go to the specific issues I had raised in my memo. So first, the drive-through window. The applicant has revised the plan and relocated the menu board sign to the southeast corner of the building. But my question was actually related to the queuing space. Yes, there's more queuing space than what was provided earlier, but even at the last meeting, I had raised this issue that probably having the pickup window on the northerly facade will elevate the problem better, or there'll be more queuing space. So we would just, I know you testified that once you have a tenant, you still don't know what the plan is and you will consider moving it. I recommend that we be a part of a meeting when you have that, so that we can give our input. But our preference would be to have the window on the northern facade.
And we would agree, before that is, before a zoning letter is signed off, we'll meet with you, make sure you're satisfied. If not, we either have to come back or work out another solution.
Sure. The tandem parking spaces. I'll talk about parking in the end because I need to fill up the board with what has happened and how we came up with the language we have. But the tandem parking spaces, the ordinance is silent on whether tandem parking is allowed or not. But in one section, it specifies that any space should have appropriate access. And I believe if they want to have tandem parking spaces, they should seek for a waiver on that.
Yes, we understand.
And you mentioned no flagpole, right?
That's correct.
All right, going back to the parking. So the applicant has reduced the development by 4,500 square feet. And when we got the revised plans, we looked at it for parking. And in my first memo, I had said that if the township parking standards were applied, then the parking requirement for this development would be 300 some units, but 300 parking stalls. But then I went back because that number seemed to be significantly high compared to what the town center district standards required. And I started doing a lot of research. In fact, the parking analysis was done by all township of professionals. We brainstormed together to come up with a solution. And what I noticed is the township's parking requirement for drive-through restaurants is significantly high, and that's what pushes the parking. Like in my previous memo, when I said it generates a parking need of 300 plus stalls, that number was inaccurate because drive-through restaurants based on ITE standards or even the ULI is somewhere in the range of 100 one space for every 100 square feet. When it's a more urbanized area, it's somewhere around 115 square feet. But our township ordinance requires one space for every 30 square feet of space. So if we apply that standards, that would be inaccurate. And so we started researching. We evaluated ITE parking generation. We looked at ULI's shared parking. We looked at ULI's shopping center parking requirements. And then we took an average of what would be the parking requirement. And it turns out that 4.1 space per 1,000 square feet would be appropriate. And if we apply that parking ratio, it creates a parking need of 142 spaces. Now, in the last meeting, I had mentioned that the town center development that is across the street had a parking requirement as one space for every 250. If you apply the 4.1 ratio for this development, it creates a parking need of 142 spaces. But the same thing if you translate it based on the 34,525 square feet of development, that ratio is somewhere around one space for every 244, which is more. In fact, they're providing more parking than what is there on the opposite side of this proposed development. So we came up with the 10,500 limit because ULI says that when you have shared parking and you have these ratios, there has to be a certain limit on the restaurant use. So we calculated almost 30% of the development would be restricted, would be used for restaurants. So that's the limit. But the number turns out to be 10,300, so we rounded it up to 10,500. But the 142 spaces did include the outdoor dining areas. But at the same time, these outdoor dining areas are seasonal. So it's very difficult to anticipate how much parking would be generated by those spaces because it's not clear how much of it would be really used, how many tables would be there. So I would recommend that with the outdoor dining, they come back to the planning and the engineering department for approval. So the 10,500 square feet is the limitation on the restaurant use. They cannot have more than that. If they exceed the 10,500 requirement, they have to come back to the planning board for approval. But with the outdoor dining, when that occurs, they could come back to the planning and engineering department for approval.
All right, and can I respond? Can I respond? So our concern is that if these two professionals are here, we're comfortable with that arrangement, but if they retire or leave their job, we're going to have strangers dealing with this application, and it's almost impossible to negotiate a lease with a tenant, meet with the town, when there may be a moving target as to what can and can't be used, and that's why we'd like finality and certainty tonight as to what can and can't happen. Again, the outdoor seating area is seasonal. It's already included in our parking count requirement, and the 142 square parking spaces therefore include that in the requirement. And so we're comfortable saying instead of 10,500 square feet, make it 10,500 square feet plus the outdoor seating area. Again, we don't know what tenant will use it. What happens if we rent to a tenant and then halfway through they decide to put seats outside, then they have to come back. We'd have to come back to the town and see if the town will let them. In the leasing world, the uncertainty makes it difficult to move forward. So that's why we want finality in whatever way we can get to it. And this suggestion, although in a perfect world would work, this is not a perfect world, and things never work that way. So we're going to be, that's why if we can get some finality in the outdoor seating numbers, for example, can we say that it would be 12,500 square feet, which you may not want because then you'd have 12,000 square feet of restaurants within the building and not the outdoor seating. That's why we thought it would be a less intense approach to simply carve out the outdoor seating. In the end, the board's going to have to make the call, but that's the quandary we face tonight.
Okay. Nicole?
I mean, I think just to continue on the parking, and just, Vina and mine and Deanna's thought process on it, if you get a breakfast place like Comfy, their peak is before 4 p.m. They might have a lunchtime crowd and a morning crowd, but they wouldn't have a nighttime crowd. So without knowing who the tenant is, we're trying to sort of craft some wording, and it was even difficult for us. Vina and I were upstairs just now, even tweaking it to sort of, cap it at the 10,500. There are places in town where there are strip malls that do have a lot of restaurant uses, but they also have other uses that share their parking. That have other uses, such as like an office complex or a bank, that they share parking with, that they know that they have that available parking there. That scenario isn't here, and that's why it's unique. Does the applicant meet the 1 per 300 square foot parking requirement of our ordinance? Yes. Do we believe that that is not an appropriate parking requirement for the town center district zone? Yes. Is it proved by what's happening across the street? Yes. Can we do something other than suggest to the applicant to limit their restaurant, which they have agreed to some point? So I think there has to be some fine tuning. What I'm hearing is I don't think that can happen tonight. But we certainly can work with them to try and come to an understanding where we can have it easier should me and Vina retire tomorrow. Which is not going to happen, but anyway, we can move on to that. I wanted to go back to how Jeremy had started. He had started talking about us meeting with Middlesex County. V and I had gone and met with Middlesex County prior to the applicant joining us on many projects, one being the Cottrell Farm across the street. They did provide me with a memo that they had given to the applicant in February 2018, before we even had this application in our hands. That memo or that email from their planning and engineering department, actually I believe one of the engineers in their department had actually sent them a memo saying you need a dedicated left into your site that would require 42 feet of pavement, widening, however that was to occur. When they had handed that to me, I said, we must think alike, because I said the same exact thing. So I just want you to know the 42-foot pavement widening isn't from me. The dedicated left in there isn't from me. It is actually a Middlesex County requirement. The plans, though, as far as if the board decides to approve this, haven't been finalized as far as the county is concerned with 516, as far as the left turn lane, as far as all that detail. That detail, should the board approve, would come as part of compliance resolution. There's now a vinyl sheet piling wall that's proposed instead of the previous wall that they were originally proposing. The concerns that I have with that is that they had on the details, and there was limited amount of information because they had a limited amount of time to get in the plans to us. So there was a fence that was actually shown on top of the wall, but when I looked up information on that type of wall, it seems like the wall is capped with a vinyl capping on it. So I wasn't sure how then the fence gets secured on top of the wall. The fence was actually 3 feet in height, and then you have 12 inches to a proposed guide rail in the parking area. So originally I said, well, if the fence has to be embedded in concrete for security purposes, I don't know how that gets established because I don't have a detail for that wall. And then maybe it's better as an application to be in front of the wall, but there's limited space. And then I say all this to say, I don't think it should be 3 feet, I think it should be 6. So I didn't hear Jeremy in his conversation before say what the fence height would be adjacent or on that wall, because the guide rail is in close proximity. It's about 12 inches away. Somebody can actually stand on the guide rail and either get over a 6 foot, a 4 foot. I'm thinking if it's 6 and it's mounted somehow on that vinyl wall, then it could then be a more protective barrier.
So just to respond a couple of those things, in terms of the cap of the vinyl wall, it can actually be several things. It can be vinyl, it can be treated lumber, and it can even be poured concrete. So it is possible to attach the fence to the top with a flange system, although frankly it probably is cheaper to embed it in concrete in a more traditional fashion in front of the wall. So I would be inclined to agree with you on that. In terms of the height of the fence, I would agree 3 feet is probably too short with the guide rail. This is more of an aesthetic thing, because a 6-foot fence is a 6-foot fence, and it's going to look like that. It certainly makes it much more difficult for somebody to get over it. But at the same time, nobody's going to, like for a 4-foot fence, for instance, you're not going to accidentally fall off a 4-foot fence. You would have to be climbing it and going over it on purpose. So I think the applicant would support either a 4-foot or a 6-foot fence, and I think it comes down to an aesthetic thing. I personally believe both would be safe. And it's really more of an aesthetic preference.
There were other comments that Jeremy didn't go through, but I have to assume that if you didn't go through it and there was a comment there that you agree to accomplish it, should the board approve it, the application?
Correct. Yes.
I think that's all I had. I just wanted, for the record, there was a lot of comments that I had on drainage, the stormwater management report that was submitted, and there was a lot of revisions that were done as far as the report was concerned, the drainage areas. They had removed the surface detention basin at the south southwesterly corner of the property. So there was a lot that was done. Originally, they were not accomplishing the reductions for the 2, 10, and 100-year storms. That is now being done. They are capturing the runoff from County Route 516, which goes into the site currently today. They are now capturing it. Before, there was some dialogue that I had at the last meeting where I said, okay, that runoff is going to run down 516. It's going to be captured in Cottrell. You have to give me a pipe capacity analysis for that run to see if the pipes have to be actually upsized. That then goes away. So there's a lot of drainage comments that I had originally that have been accomplished in this next iteration. There was an email from the homeowners association behind this development who had a lot of questions about the drainage and about, you know, the direction of flow and what was going on, and hopefully I was able to answer point by point what was going on with the drainage on site as it is proposed now, which they weren't privy to because the new iteration, I'm not sure if they had seen that.
Okay, our traffic consultant?
Deanna Drum, for the record. Most of our review was really cleaning up signage striping. One of the concerns I particularly had primarily two concerns, was really the access on Cottrell Road, which is a right in, right out. I thought the island was really small, that people can make pretty much, they could make a left in, left out if they really wanted to. I believe we asked them to just kind of work with that island design, try to make it a little larger. And I believe, Jeremy, I believe you guys are okay with that, correct?
That's correct. We'll probably wind up enlarging the driveway outer radii to make or allow for more area of the island and sharpen up the corners, basically.
Yeah. One of our biggest concerns is if you look at the delivery truck template, they are anticipating to make a right onto Thames to reach Cottrell Road. My concern with the template is it takes the full width of Thames and the truck can't straighten up before it gets to Cottrell Road. And my concern with that, if it's angled on the approach, if somebody's making a right turn or a left turn in off of Cottrell Road, it can create, I think, really a safety issue on that because that truck cannot straighten up at the stop sign. So this is one of my really, I think it's a safety concern that really needs to kind of be looked at in regards to the access on Thames Drive. I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention. I believe, Jeremy, I assume you guys are going to work on with our office regarding that design.
And that's what I was alluding to earlier in my testimony. We're going to, because I agreed with your concern, we were going to change if it's a tractor-trailer truck, the truck would then enter from 516 in the westerly driveway, circulate through the site, past the loading zone, back into it, and then it would be able to pull straight out and use the direct Cottrell driveway and make the right turn back to the signal. In fact, when we make the islands larger and we increase the sweep, that'll make that even easier. And that way a tractor-trailer doesn't have to use the Thames driveway at all, and that will eliminate that concern.
Yeah, and we're fine. We can work with their office when we see the revised templates plan.
So then, Jeremy, would you put a no truck sign at that exit?
Yes.
Anything else?
No, that was the primary concerns that I had.
Chairwoman Cannon, there was a one-way sign that I think Deanna and I had in our comment letter that was on the exit for the drive-through, and Deanna made a good point in that it was 24 feet. So it's misleading, and there is a do not enter sign there, but people don't see it until you're basically right on it, and so that's why we were thinking a one-way out to show people as they're driving north from the entrance on Cottrell past the drive-through that they know that they can't turn in there. There's actually, before it was angled parking inside there on that drive-through out, but now it's actually perpendicular, so it appears that if somebody's driving and they see that row of parking in that exit, they might want to swing in there, so it's good to have them know that it's a one-way out.
Agreed. So we'll agree to put the additional signage, and we could even do something on the pavement, a painted one-way or something as well, but certainly the signage.
Okay, anyone from the board have any questions? Yes, Mr. Piscity?
Can you just clarify what you did with Building B,
So
the change?
Sure. So Building B used to be, well, it was always, obviously, the first story went the full footprint, but a portion of the building was also a second story, a leasable area. That's been completely eliminated. Aesthetically, it'll still look like there's a second story, but now it'll be a faux second story, more in keeping with the town center's, I guess, aesthetic portions of the ordinance. But in terms of actual functional space, there will be no functional space on the second floor, and that's a reduction of 4,500 square feet.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, Mr. Luca?
I was just wondering, how does tandem parking typically work? I'm familiar with cases like if you have a condo with deeded tandem parking or something like that, but something
Yes.
public in a shopping center. How do you foresee that working?
That would be an employee-only type of parking stall, and especially where it's located back in this end, this use here is likely to be an office type of use or something that's not dependent on visibility, because this does not have great highway visibility. So those uses usually are more suitable to have assigned parking, and you know, there's either people are coming in on a shift, they're working a 9 to 5, you know, office hours, something like that, and they can control, just like you would at your home, parking in a tandem fashion.
Yeah, and the landlord would control that through the leases too and designate that for specific tenant employee spaces.
Is there going to be signage indicating that or
Yes.
specific?
Yes, just to be clear, those 3 stalls are land banks, so they're not actually going to be constructed on day one. The retaining wall will be constructed for it, and the stormwater is designed as if it's there, but on day one, they won't be paved. The curb will go across like any normal parking lot curb would. If they get built, then absolutely, I would envision both post-mounted signage as well as painted lettering on those stalls.
I was also curious too, and I'm sorry, I had a couple of questions. In the previous testimony, you had alluded to both the rain garden and the rock garden. Is there still a rock garden? I don't see any note of that on the plans.
I don't recall testifying about a rock garden. I wonder, perhaps there was just miscommunication, but it was always a rain garden. There is another public space at the corner here. It's not a rock garden, but it's an outdoor, you know, garden area, patio area that's for public use. So that continues to be there. But in terms of stormwater management, there's only the rain garden as far as surface features.
Okay, and just for clarification too, I'm a little confused about the patio next to Building B that we've been referring. Is that something that the tenant on that end portion of the building, would that be tenant space, or is that considered to be the property of the landlord? I'm a little confused because we're referring to restaurants utilizing it and it being counted as part of that, so if you could just clarify that?
It would be use that would be available to that tenant, the end tenant, but because it's seasonal, it's not enclosed or heated or anything like that, it's not leasable space. So that's kind of gets back to what Mr. Alfieri was describing earlier in terms of the quandary on the parking. Now, if it were to become enclosed, or they were to put, you know, the canvas and the heaters, stuff like that, then, and we would agree that it should be counted as restaurant parking space. But as an open outdoor seating, you know, essentially limited to summer use, then it really doesn't make sense to count it toward the parking requirement.
So it is then affiliated with that tenant and it's not like a truly non-affiliated area?
That's correct. Those 3 areas would not be, I mean, they'd be places of public accommodation, but not open to the general public, in contrast to the area on the corner of Cottrell and 516, which is meant to be a public space that's not under anyone's particular control, although, of course, the property owner will maintain it, as is the norm, but it is open to the public.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I had a couple questions. I know in one of the notes, I don't know if it was in the previous memorandum from our planner, she had mentioned about the drive-in restaurant, instead of having it flipped so that it's closer to the road and having the parking inside. Is that being considered at all?
Yes, it was considered, and the reason it's not been done, if you look at the map up on the screen, you'll see that the freshwater wetlands comes in on both sides of Building D, kind of envelops three sides of it. So it creates a pocket of area, if you will. So if we were to flip it and put Building D up on Contrell, it would change the flow. Right now, you can see the parking lot flows in a fairly linear fashion. If we were to change it, it would force it to go in and back out, and it'd have all these reverse curves, which we felt from a circulation standpoint and a line of sight standpoint would be much less desirable. So kind of following the natural features on the site, we thought it would be better to put the restaurant use and the drive-through all in the back here, and then have the nice flow through the parking area, access to the driveways, et cetera. It is, just to bear in mind, it is a very small parking field. It's not, this is not like at a mall or something like that, or a supermarket. So it's a relatively, well, I know it's not exactly consistent with the town center's aesthetic appeal. It is a very small parking lot, and we are significantly constrained on the site with the freshwater wetlands.
Yeah, because the concept of the town center was to not have parking in the front. I mean, on the street side.
I totally, not debating that in any way, fully understand that. It's just with the way the site lays out, the way these wetlands come around on both sides, it really kind of forces our hand a bit to make a workable layout.
Also, why is that a two-story? What kind of, if you're going to have a restaurant on the bottom floor, what would be on the?
Well, it might be a bank, we don't know.
Bank?
And then the banks would have, they usually have,
Oh, a bank is as the drive-in.
yes, exactly. And if it is a restaurant, it may not be usable, it may be unrentable. We don't know. You know, the second floor we're talking about.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not in favor of that, personally. I mean, I go and see a McDonald's or a Burger King in town
An
center.
office above it, right, understood.
And let's see, there was one other thing. And what about, we had talked about, since you don't know who the tenants are going to be, that we would do percentages and types of store, and so you have for the restaurants, I guess, the 10,000, is that the 10,500 square feet?
Yes, the restaurants, right.
But what about other uses?
Well, they would be whatever's permitted in the zone. I think the concern was that the general retail is all pretty consistent. It's the restaurants that have a higher parking demand. That's why I think your board professionals focused on the restaurants.
You don't think it's necessary to define other uses by percentage? What about like a gym or something that?
I think it would be really hard for them to distinguish between other uses. The reason we emphasized on the restaurants was because that generates most parking. But I think it's very hard for them to even predict the other tenant spaces at this point, and as long as it doesn't generate a higher parking need, I think we should be okay. The restaurants are the ones that really cause problems with parking.
All right, we'll open up to the public just on questions or comments on the testimony that was given by this
Actually, I'm
witness.
sorry, I have one more clarifying question, if I may, Chairwoman.
yeah.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to go back for one moment to Building D, the second floor. Is that no longer intended to be a conference room for the developer? Testimony was given last time that that space was to be dedicated to the developer for use as a conference room? I'm referring to page 126 of the transcript.
I don't remember that being discussed. It might be, I don't remember it being discussed at all.
No, I know there's specific uses. but,
Actually.
It's indicated on page
you know,
126
it's
of the
hard.
transcript.
You don't want wall.
Well, I believe you. I'm just,
And a mixture.
I'm not sure who said that, so we're going to have to look at page 126. Whose testimony was that? Was that the architect?
The indication is Dietz Direct.
The architect.
He's here. This is Mr. Dietz, who testified last meeting, and you remain under oath, Mr. Dietz.
Okay, but we're going to open it up to the public on his comments. So is he just going to comment about this one
Just that,
question?
he's not testifying other than to
Okay.
respond.
I believe my testimony meant to be, if it was misunderstood or misinterpreted, I apologize. I believe I made reference to the adjacent shopping center, which I was the architect for, and the owner of that shopping center has his conference room up above the bank drive-through in a similar design, and I think I might have just made reference to that. I've not been asked or told by the applicant that they would specifically use that as part of their management, but I think I made reference to across the street shopping center that I was the architect for and did the interiors for their office space, and they put a conference room over the bank drive-through.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. The testimony is a little bit confusing. It does seem to suggest Building D, but thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, so we're going to open up to the public on questions or comments regarding this testimony by the engineer. Yes, if you come up and give your name and address, please.
Let's see it behind there. Please.
Philip McGovern, 201 Yorkshire Court in Society Hill. The development plan, according to the application analysis, is projected to be built in 2020. Is this accurate? And when construction begins, where will the construction vehicles park as well as the construction workers' vehicles park? Hopefully not on Thames.
I could answer the first question. I'm not sure about the second. And the applicant would like to start building next year, but the permitting process for a development such as this would probably take another year from now. That's why that might be a likely start date. But in terms of construction vehicles, the engineer.
At this time, we have not done any kind of a construction staging plan, but it would be typical for construction vehicles to enter from 516. I'm sure some will leave via Cottrell because we have access to the signal to get back either east or westbound on 516 from Cottrell. As far as staging, typically the construction vehicles and those employees would stage somewhere on the site.
And usually, there's a pre-construction meeting with the town professionals and the contractors, and they deal with all of those controls so that they're monitored, and police presence, et cetera, would have to be provided as well.
And that would be spelled out in a developer's agreement, which is fairly typical of a development like this.
Also, are there any updates on which retail stores for the 4 buildings? And what about buildings C and D? What plans are there for the second story? To Ms. Cannon's point about you don't want to have second story over a fast food restaurant. And also, how late will the stores be open? Any of them 24/7? If Building D is fast food, what kind of fast food? What about smells, especially near Minstrel and Excalibur? Currently, there are 70 vacant stores in Old Bridge Township in a good economy, including some within a half a mile of proposed site. Why add more stores? Thank you.
Do you want to comment?
That was a comment. I'm not sure if it was a question, but this applicant, as we indicated at the last meeting, owns other centers in town. They're all fully rented or substantially rented. New centers do very well. They're very confident that they could fill them, but again, not being able to negotiate with tenants until we get further along in the development process. That's why we can't identify a specific tenant.
Okay, who's next? Yes. You can stand or sit.
Jack Safran, 192 Yorkshire Court, Society Hill. Just a couple of quick questions. With respect to the driveway that's exiting onto Thames Drive, I got really confused. You said there's only be a right turn. Is there going to be a sign, or is it going to be developed that can only make a right turn?
It will be both. So it will be signed for right turn only, and it will also have the radii and the curb will, let's see, the easterly curb will come to a fairly sharp point. In fact, one of the board professionals asked us to sharpen it even more than it already is, and that will channelize vehicles to make that right turn.
So they would not be able to make a left turn.
That's correct.
Okay. A few moments ago, the young lady was talking about the traffic and all of that, and you had indicated that the exit, this driveway, would have a sign, no trucks. But last time, you were saying that that's where the trucks would be exiting. So I'm really confused. What is the purpose of that driveway if there's no trucks gonna come out of there, coming into Thames Drive?
The couple things in that. First, the plan has changed. The original plan was for trucks to exit through this driveway, so that is a material change to the layout. So you are recalling that correctly, but we have changed the layout, and we are now stipulating that no trucks will utilize that driveway. The purpose of that driveway is the other driveway we have on Cottrell is what we refer to as a right-in, right-out driveway. So you cannot make a left onto Cottrell from this driveway. So in order to allow for left turn movements, and again, this would not be for trucks, although we don't anticipate trucks going southbound on Cottrell. For passenger vehicles to make that left, you would come out onto Thames and then stage at the intersection of Thames and Cottrell and be able to make the left turn. It's not a heavy movement, but it's a movement we feel that some of the patrons of the shopping center might want to make.
Going back, you're coming into Thames, this drive-through exits back onto Cottrell. This driveway is in a hitting corner coming onto Thames Drive with the possibility of 1 or 2 cars coming, which makes absolutely zero sense to me, considering that the young lady had mentioned, if anybody comes onto Thames Drive and makes that right turn, any kind of oversized vehicle, you're gonna have a hard time because, one, Thames Drive was never built to the standards of the Township of Old Bridge. Hovnanian had cut a deal with them, and the roadway is very narrow and is not sufficient to hold much traffic. Right now, we are setting up a repaving of Thames Drive, and Old Bridge MUA had to come in and they reinforced all of the sewers because that roadway is really more like a parking lot than a roadway. It's narrow and it's not fully developed. So I'm not sure what the purpose of that driveway coming onto Thames Drive is to what? Help 1 or 2 cars, as you said, coming from somewhere in the parking to have a left turn onto Cottrell? Come onto Cottrell and make a left turn, you have nothing but residential, so I'm not even sure what the purpose of that left turn would serve. Definitely nothing good for trucks. Couple of cars, they're better off going on to 516, you have an east-west, and you have right to Route 9. There's absolutely zero reason come onto Thames Drive and make a left turn into another residential area.
You just expressed the reason for it, though, is because there is a residential area to the south, and those people may well, and in fact are likely will be patrons of the shopping center, and I imagine they're patrons of the one across the street. So for them to be able to return to their homes, they need to be able to go southbound on Cottrell. So that is the purpose of the driveway.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Chad Valenzola. I'm a resident 378 Minstrel Court, which, by the way, with that little pointer that's right behind Building A, if you could just zap it for me, just so you can see what I'm talking about. My question is 516, from what I understand, you guys are going to widen it to be 2 lanes on one side and 2 lanes on another side?
No, the widening is very small, actually. It's a 4-foot widening in total. And what that's going to allow us to do is in the center of the roadway, we're going to be able to put dedicated left turn lanes. And by that I mean those lanes where you see the kind of left arrows and they say only under them. So that's a dedicated left turn lane, and there'll be 2 of them, one an eastbound and one westbound. The westbound one will be to come into the shopping center. If you're heading westbound on 516, you would make the left into the shopping center. The one that would be kind of the mirror image of that, heading eastbound, would be to make the left turn into the future township/county park. They have moved, their original concept had that driveway more in the center of our frontage. They are shifting that to the east to line up with our driveway, and then that'll facilitate their left turn movement.
So here's my concern. I'm already near a busy road. Now I'm going to be near an even busier road. So for the people that are where you pointed out before, right behind Building A, it's not going to be a good look. And the amount of traffic that we experience already when school's in session, school's not even in session. It took me a couple of minutes just to make a left to come here out of Thames. So it's a very major concern for me, who lives on 378 Minstrel Court. The other concern I have is with all of this heavy construction, I'm only 35 feet away, and from what I understand, heavy construction does cause considerable damage to existing structures, specifically if it's under 100 yards, which, based upon my calculations, I'm about 12 yards away from it. So how are we going to contend with potential structural damage to all of those units on Minstrel Court? And may I add, the other areas will also experience it because of the distance.
Yeah, first of all, that construction takes place near other buildings every day of the week and all over the state. There's certainly ways to build a building without damaging property that's 5 feet away, never mind 30 feet away. The building department has to inspect everything that's done. There are strict building standards that have to be complied with, so it just doesn't happen.
I don't know if I would agree with that statement, but if a professional can back that statement up, I'd be curious to know what that professional says. In addition, the sound that's going to be taking place when all of this is going on in a clearly very close to a residential unit is going to be also very challenging for the existing residents that have been there for over 20 to 30 years.
There will be sound when there's construction. There's no way to avoid it. We're building a project in the property that's zoned for this use. It's not as if we're asking for a use variance and building commercial buildings in a residential zone. So yes, there will be some construction disruption, but it's temporary, and once it's built, it stops.
And there are restrictions on the time and when they can be working and when they can't. So there are some restrictions on that.
But as future reference, guys, when you zone something for a business, try not to make it so close to an existing structure that's already been established. It's one thing if you're building it when it's all being built, which I know that was the original intent, but this is now going to be a very, very arduous time for the existing residents here. So please take that under your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Who's next? Yes?
Short? It's okay, I'm loud. Susan Weiss, 175 Bristol. One of my fellow residents who just talked was, I had some of the same comments. I'm not going to repeat them, don't worry. But my curiosity is, has anybody done an analysis around what that is going to do for the traffic for us getting out of our development?
Yeah,
either out of Thames, which is sometimes not easy, or making a left onto 516.
The next witness is a traffic engineer. She'll testify to the traffic aspects of this site, this project.
Okay, taking into consideration what happens today and the backups and the changes you're making. Okay, and then my one other question is, I was here at the last hearing, and I thought I heard that there would be no tractor trailer for delivery, that you were talking about smaller trucks, but today you were talking about tractor trailers. So we're just curious, did I hear wrong, or did something change?
No, nothing changed. I did put on the record last time that larger delivery vehicles, and specifically tractor trailers, would be potentially servicing Building D. We did say that the other buildings, and the architect more thoroughly described them in his testimony, but they're of a size that it just doesn't make sense for tractor trailer delivery. This is the only building on the site that might, and I do say might, have a tractor trailer service. And even then, this wouldn't be a large over-the-road tractor trailer. These would be these smaller local delivery types, probably a food service type of tractor trailer, if in fact that is a restaurant. So that's the only site, or the only building rather, on the site that has the potential to draw any kind of a tractor trailer delivery.
Okay, so unknown. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, in the back there?
Hi, Joanne Nocera, 370 Minstrel Court. I'm a new homeowner in HOA, and didn't know there'd be that many people here tonight, but I know now why. I have a quick question about Building B. I'm very concerned about this whole town situation. So you're saying that you're deducting it by 4,500 feet, and there is no second story? Or is there going to be a second story on Building B? Because my concerns are, as you quoted, there's no functional space. So if there's no functional space, does it need to be that high?
The answer is yes, it has to be that high. It's required by ordinance to have that faux second story, so it will be that high. It doesn't require a variance. It'll be fully conforming now. Originally, we had a height variance when we had a functional second story, but now that we're no longer doing a functional second story, it will conform with
And
the
it still
ordinance.
has to have the height, even though you have no function for it.
Correct.
That's concerning for me. Thank you.
Okay, I think this lady was before you, then I'll call you.
Good evening. My name is Eileen O'Connor. I live at 2 Excalibur Court, and I represent Eileen O'Connor, 2 Excalibur Court. I represent the property owner, and I have some...
Wait. Could we clarify what you mean by represent the property owner?
She's my sister and a cancer survivor, and I told her she should stay home, so I would represent her. I live at the property as well.
You're not her attorney, you're...
I needed to, I
Oh,
just
no,
wanted
I'm
to
her
understand.
sister. I'm not an attorney.
And you're here to ask questions right now?
Yes.
Okay.
I've lived at the property for 7 years, so I haven't paid rent. Huh. I have some serious concerns about the vibration damage. This gentleman just said that there's buildings built all over. Where? And we would really like to see some kind of proof that that's the case, because that's extremely concerning to us. The other thing I find very concerning about this whole thing is the water drainage off of the property onto Excalibur Court. Can you talk about that, please? Because we have real problems on Excalibur Court already. I can never get to my mailbox because it's constantly flooded. So I'm very concerned that when you mess around with trees and wetlands, just as you're doing, sirs, how is that going to affect us and our already problem of flooding on Excalibur?
Okay.
Were you aware? My question is, were you aware there's flooding on Excalibur?
No, I'm not aware of flooding on Excalibur.
Have you ever been on Excalibur?
I have been through there, but not during a rain event.
Okay. Well,
Can he
somebody
answer-
should.
Can he answer your question about how the drainage works?
Yes.
So there is both a state stormwater management rule and also the local ordinance has stormwater management rules that read very similarly. In the way that drainage is handled in the state of New Jersey, we have to determine what is the existing rate of runoff under today's conditions that are leaving the property, and then we have to reduce that is what becomes the allowable flow rate, and that is reduced for the 2-year storm. It's reduced by 50%, for the 10-year storm by 75%, and for the 100-year storm by 20%. So that those reduction factors are applied to the existing. That sets our maximum allowable discharge. We then design the stormwater management system, and that's what I was describing earlier, in the 4 different locations on the site to meet those objectives. And we have in fact done that. You heard the board's engineer confirm that we've done that. So that is what's required, and that reduction, the purpose or intent behind that peak rate reduction is to mitigate any off-site flooding impacts that could occur as part of the project.
Okay. So what does that mean? Is my mailbox going to flood? Is my front door going to flood? I mean, what does that mean?
If your mailbox is already flooding, I'm going to say that yes, it's going to continue to flood.
Okay, so there it is, a violation of federal law. No, I'm serious. This is really very intrusive to a lot of residents, and there's a lot wrong here. And really, we're asking you, the planning board, stop this. This is really bad.
Okay, we appreciate
My
your-
question is, can you stop it, Ms. Cannon? Is it in your ability? That's my question.
Hearing the application now, we
I
have to
don't
hear
mean to
all the
be.
information.
Thank you very much.
Okay? You may be able to have someone from the township come out and take a look at what may be causing that, or give you some ideas of how it could be resolved.
Who owns the roads that are triangle of this Thames, Cottrell, 516? 516 is owned by Old Bridge, I'm assuming.
No, the county.
Do the county own all of the streets?
No, the county owns
County Route
516.
516 is owned by the county. Cottrell Road south of 516 is Township Road. Thames is Township Road. Cottrell Road north of 516 is actually county.
When we have inclement weather, do we not pay for our own cleaning? No, it is.
Okay, well, we'll try to get those answers for you, but that really isn't part of this application.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Yes, this gentleman here with the black shirt.
How are you? Michael Anderson, 304 Pewter. In the previous meeting, we had spoken about the driveway onto Thames. You had said maybe the developer would think about eliminating it because we had said that a lot of our residents use that for walking purposes, for their dogs, their pets, and everything like that. We don't want to see the trees get knocked down, and we don't want to see any more cars come into it. And I think at the last meeting, you said that the developer may be willing to scratch that whole entire driveway. Apparently, that did not happen. Can you explain why he decided to go through with that driveway?
For clarity, the driveway is significantly different than originally proposed. Originally, this was a two-way driveway and was going to have full access on Thames. So this is a significant change. The driveway is narrower now. It was 24 feet, now it's 18 feet. It was two-way, it's now one-way. It was full access, it is now right out only. And it used to be designed for trucks, and it is now trucks prohibited. So it's not that the developer hasn't done anything. In fact, we've done quite a bit with that driveway. But as I explained to the prior gentleman, we believe that some patrons of the center will live south of the site on Cottrell or off of Cottrell, and that there'll be a desire or need to make a left turn to head southbound on Cottrell. So accessing Thames is the logical way to do that. We don't want to create another intersection in some kind of a near offset, also making a left. That would be certainly left safe. The way it is now, we've got a four-way intersection, essentially, when you look at the driveway across the street to the west, and that would be an appropriate location to have full movements such as exists today and would continue to exist with the proposed driveway.
Speaking on that, you said people would want to make the left turn. Have you ever gone to that corner and tried to make a left turn from Thames? Have you aware of that intersection? Because you have the other shopping center, which is a very busy shopping center, especially in the mornings when the gym is in session and people go to Dunkin' Donuts. People are coming out. You have people coming up Cottrell from both ways. I mean, do you understand, to make a left, it's really not that simple. So you're basically telling people to add more traffic to an already busy intersection?
There are a lot of answers to that. First, there is traffic statewide. Anybody who lives in New Jersey can't tell you there's not traffic anywhere. Part of doing development like this, though, and part of really the whole town center concept, is to bring development closer to where people live and work. And that's why the parking standard is the way it is. That's why there are these significant bikeways and walkways. The whole idea is to place this square footage closer to where people live, which actually reduces the overall amount of traffic. And while our traffic engineer can certainly testify to this more, a lot of these uses are not end destinations. These are uses that are what's called pass-by trips, so they're on your way to or from something. And in many cases, these could be walking trips. People at the municipal center, whether that be the library or here at Town Hall, the senior center, they can walk over. People at the park that's coming soon. Again, you'll be able to walk over people that want to use both shopping centers. They maybe have a use in both that they want to visit. So that's the whole point of the town center zoning that's been in place for a couple decades now. So yes, is there heavy traffic here like many, many places in New Jersey? Absolutely, there is. But that doesn't mean that it's inappropriate to, or that we shouldn't endeavor to improve zoning, improve the built environment. And that's absolutely what this application is accomplishing.
So at this point, the developer does not care that he's going to be knocking down trees, knocking down a natural barrier to build this driveway? That's not a concern?
There's no response to that.
Okay. On the last previous meeting, we had spoken about buildings A, B, and C. We spoke about a loading zone, and your response was that a loading zone was not necessary because the stores that are being marketed would be ones that if they got deliveries, they'd be more like a UPS or a FedEx. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay, so let's speak about a new complex, Vision Court, which is half a mile down the road on 516. I don't know if you're aware, there's a bakery there called Five Loaves. It's not exactly a big building. That would be the type of building that could fit in one of these. I don't know if you're aware, but they get tractor-truck deliveries. They don't get a FedEx or a UPS. You guys have both stated that you are not aware of anything that's going to be in there yet as far as the lease. So it's possible that there could be a bakery in one of those small places. Most bakeries will not get their deliveries of eggs and milk from a UPS truck. Is there any way you can guarantee in a lease where the person that signs onto a lease can say they will not get any deliveries from a tractor truck driver?
We could certainly speak to the landlord about that. Neither of us have authority to say yes or no, but we'll.
So there's a possibility that somebody can rent out that building and need tractor truck deliveries, and there is no loading zone for A, B, and C.
We'll speak to the landlord and respond to you once we do.
Okay, but I'm asking, is that a possibility that he would rent out to someone with that need?
Again, we'll speak to the landlord and respond. How many times?
Okay, so going back to what you said previously, you said that the landlord is very confident that these buildings will get leased. Well, Vision Court is a fairly new building that has all these different, buildings open for it for a lease. Half of them is still being unleased. If you go down Route 18, almost across the street from the hospital, which is a very busy one, there's a shopping center there, and I think that might be one that your tenant might own.
Hey, I don't want to interrupt you, but I think that these comments are better at the end.
Well, I'm just going to finish the
Yeah,
question.
I know what you're
All right,
saying, but
well-
we need to move along.
Okay, well, I'm just going to finish this. So on the Route 18, there are empty storefronts. So my question is, what makes it so confident that all these will get leased? Meanwhile, other retail buildings in this area that are new are not fully leased.
The zoning laws don't say that you can't build a building unless you could prove that you could rent the space. A developer has the right to take a risk and invest millions of dollars to develop a site. And if they're confident that the market will support it, that's what they're going to do. So we're developing it per the zone. We're not introducing uses that are not permitted here. So our burden is not to show you that we can rent the space. We're confident with the money that we're putting up that we can rent the space.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, one more, and then we're going to go on. Do you need a break?
Hi, good evening. Joanne Levine, 34 Cloister Court, Society Hill. I don't know if you remember at the last meeting, I discussed the safety coming out of Thames, which was a big concern, and it still is a big concern. That roadway that's coming onto Thames, I was hoping, coming to this meeting, that maybe, and I know it's a pipe dream, that maybe they would say, okay, well, we're going to close that entrance or exit, whatever they're calling it, leave all the traffic to Cottrell. Is it a possibility for the board to consider, as well as the developer, to do away with that Thames entrance or exit? I know they're saying that's going to be just one way and making the right. As the point that I made last time, it was the concern of safety at that corner. It's a problem now. It's only going to be worse. And I know there is a question in this. Going back to last meeting, I thought that it is a very nice thought to put this town center as we have on the opposite corner. But we're not Matawan, and we don't have, it would be so nice if we had parking on the street so that people who don't have parking, because then that brings me to my next issue of the amount of parking space that is, we know, and I know that they're doing their best to try to put in parking and to accommodate everyone. I know for a fact it's not going to be enough, because anytime we have any kind of, we had Old Bridge Day, there's parking all over Thames, and I know that we overlook it on things like that, because it's the one day, it's Old Bridge Day. This is going to be a daily thing. It's going to be stores that are open. If we had parking like Red Bank, I work in Red Bank, you can walk the streets in Red Bank. Beautiful stores, you have parking lots. This is our concern as residents, and putting money into our home. It's our home. This is where we raise our children. This is, our money is invested in this, and that is our concern. It's safety. It's safety foremost. Second is parking, because we know there's going to be an overflow. I know millions of studies have been done. There's going to be a problem. And the entrance and exit of 516, we can't get out of right now either. So now we're going to add another entrance exit. Is there going to be a light? Is there going to be something that's going to provide? There's buses from the high school. It's really a traffic and safety nightmare. So we really need to consider it. And I think the first thing, honestly, that I would do if I had to redo these plans is to just get rid of that Thames exit or entrance, whatever it is. We walk on these streets, we stroll our children on these streets. It's just a really big concern. Please consider that. Please, that one road, please consider that. Entrance, exit, whatever it is, it's going to be a nightmare.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to close the public portion for now, and we're going to go to the next witness. Can you wait to the next witness? Because we've got a...
Michelle.
We could enforce the parking, keep it off of Thames Drive.
He's new, right?
New, yes.
Swear you in. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
State and spell your name for the record, please.
Sure, Michelle, Michelle.
You gotta spell it.
I do, yeah. Last name Breihoff, Briehoff.
Thank you.
Michelle, you're employed by Mazer Consulting, is that correct?
That's correct. I'm currently a project manager in the traffic planning department. I'll just give my qualifications while we're at it. I'm a graduate of Northeastern University. I have a degree in civil and environmental engineering. I've been a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey since 2014. My current license is in good standing. And like I said, I've been employed at Mazer since 2013, and I've testified as a traffic expert in front of many local boards, including this one,
Okay,
East Brunswick.
We'll accept your credentials.
Thank you.
And before you describe your conclusions, can you discuss with the board or tell the board what you did to analyze the various access points and intersections in order to come up with your conclusions?
Yeah, no problem. I'm just kind of going to walk the board through what we've done as far as the traffic analysis of this development. We have recently submitted a revised traffic statement or traffic study that does reflect the most recent square footage change for the development, as well as the access change on Thames, as well as we did meet with the county and provide that left turn lane into the site on 516. So the new traffic study that we did submit does incorporate all of those most recent changes. As Jeremy has previously testified to, we are proposing a right-in, right-out only access for the western driveway on 516, a full movement driveway to the east with a dedicated left turn lane along 516, which was required by Middlesex County. As far as Cottrell Road, we are proposing a right-in, right-out, and then the right-out only on Thames. We did collect our traffic data early in the year. We collected our data in February. I did check the weather because I know that came up at the last meeting, and it actually surprisingly was almost 60 degrees on that Thursday, and subsequently Saturday. We must have had one of those warm late February weekends when we did do our counts. And typically what we do for any development that we provide a traffic study for is we consult the Institute of Transportation Engineers, which does provide what's called the Trip Generation Handbook. We use the most current edition, and we are able to use the data that's provided in that manual to kind of come up with a forecast of what we believe a development of this size would generate. So we did generate the traffic for this development. I know Jeremy touched on it, but typically, and again, this is data provided by ITE, that there is a component for a shopping center or a fast food or a Dunkin' Donuts or a Wawa or any of those uses that is what's called pass-by traffic. So it's saying, the definition basically is that traffic is already traveling on the road. They're going to stop in the shopping center on their way to work, on their way home from work, whatever they're doing for the day. They're going to stop in the shopping center, and then they're going to come back out and continue on their way. So we did take the appropriate pass-by reductions for a development of this size, again, based on ITE published data. And when we factor all of that in, we looked at the distribution, where people are coming to, going from. We found that we were able to operate within the existing conditions of the roadway, specifically at the intersection of Cottrell with Old Bridge, Matawan Road, or 516. And as far as the site driveways, we found that they, again, operated at acceptable levels of service. The driveways along 516 operated at levels of service D or better, which again is an acceptable level of service. And then the driveway along Thames, we found operated for our approach at levels of service B or better. Actually, the site driveway opposite us was a level of service C for that existing shopping center. And again, those were, everything else operated at or better than those levels of service. And I guess I'll just reiterate on the parking. I know we've drilled this home many times, but we are providing over the ordinance requirement. We are providing what's within the, again, the ITE acceptable range for a shopping center of this size. And that really concludes, you know, our traffic study portion. Again, we did meet with the county. We are taking into consideration their recommendations, their improvements that they want to see. We did clean up a lot of the comments from Deanna Drum's letter regarding the traffic impact study. And other than that, I'm open to any questions.
Okay, Deanna, did you have?
Deanna Drum, for the record. We did take a look at the traffic study. I mean, it was done in our professional standard that we did. The one comment that I had on my report is one of the, I don't want to say it's a recommendation, but they were looking to retime the traffic signal at Cottrell and 516. And clearly that's going to be a county issue when they get to the county application. But one of my questions is that a typical process that the county will let you do as part of your application?
Sure. So actually, when we met with the county is requiring us to provide what's called a traffic simulation, which puts all of the traffic volumes into the program software that we use, and kind of gives them a visual representation in what looks like a traffic network of all of the cars. So they are requiring us to do that for the intersection of 516 with Cottrell. We do have to do that for all of the peak hours, including the AM peak. Even though we didn't analyze the AM peak, they're requiring it for the AM peak as well. So we will have to show them through our analysis and visually what a timing change that we're requiring, that we are proposing, what that will actually do to the intersection and how it will look. So we are required by the county to do those things.
Because I travel that every day and it's, and what about the right turn lane when you're going west? There's no real right turn lane. Are they looking at that at all? You have to go up on the
Chairwoman Cannon?
Yes.
So when I was talking to them, because I think it was Mr. Schmitz that had brought this up last time, that in our master plan, we have a channelized right turn on County Route 516 westbound onto Cottrell going northbound. When I had brought that up to, it's in our master plan, and it's in the Town Center District Standards to show that channelized right turn with a raised concrete island. When I brought that up to Middlesex County, they said absolutely no way do they want a raised island there. In fact, they were actually saying that over the years, their DPW guys who have resurfaced the roadway at that intersection, as you get closer, it's actually even getting wider at that location because of the de facto almost widening that was occurring by people trying to scoot by and make that right turn. They actually argued, we should take some of that pavement out and bring it back to what it is. Because the signals, the way they are now, the pedestrian heads for the crossing at that location is at the width, the original width. It's not for the new width. So, they're looking at that intersection along with Mazer, and I think one of the comments they also had was, I believe there's loop detectors out there. They wanted camera detection, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and that light is got to be readjusted because the
Yeah.
traffic backs up so much on the eastern side. It takes forever to get.
Yeah,
there.
I mean, unfortunately, and again, you could see that in our existing analysis of the intersection that we can tell you. I mean, I'm going to be upfront about it, that the levels of service at the intersection as they are today, don't operate the greatest. I mean, it's not terrible, but it is a New Jersey intersection, and we do plan to work with the county on any improvements that we can make to mitigate our portion of the site-generated traffic.
Okay. Nicole, did you have anything else to add? No. Okay, anyone from the board?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions.
Yes, Mr. Pink.
My first question is, there's been discussion back and forth about whether they really are going to be using to make the right turn on Thames Road.
Mhm.
You know that. But you said that there's not going, unless I misunderstood you, you probably will not have big, long-haul trucks coming into the shopping center.
That's what we.
It's my
If you're
understanding.
using regular-sized trucks, why do you even need an exit?
On Thames.
Let them go out the same way everybody else is going.
There would be no trucks exiting that
Yes.
driveway at all.
But we are providing that driveway for passenger vehicles who wish to make a left turn onto Cottrell. That is really the only movement that we're assigning to our traffic generation.
Stop people from going any way they want.
Well, no, they can make a right out, but what I'm saying is that access provides them the opportunity, whether they go out that driveway and make a right on Cottrell, which honestly wouldn't make a lot of sense because they have the right in, right out driveway just to the north of it. And I'm going to attempt to use this laser pointer, and I'm going to warn everybody that I'm the world's worst laser pointer user. If you're going to make a right turn onto Cottrell, you're more likely to use the driveway that's actually on Cottrell. So we envision this right out only driveway for passenger vehicles who wish to make a right out and then again make a left onto Cottrell. At that point, yes, they can make a right as well, but I just don't foresee it with the option to make a right there.
The patience level of most people, if they think they can pick up 30 seconds by going out the other way, they're not going to stand on line to get onto Cottrell right away.
Right. No, I understand.
My opinion, and don't give the people the opportunity to go out in all these different directions. Just giving you my thoughts on this.
Understood.
Anyone else from the board?
I have a question.
Yes.
So I just wanted to make sure my understanding is correct. It seems as though with the existing driveway onto Cottrell, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that was originally dedicated right turn out only because of the proximity to the intersection of 516 and Cottrell? The western driveway on 516, this one?
Sorry, the one.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
yes. Yeah, so right at the intersection with 516, there's a dedicated left turn lane, and they just felt that in order to make this full movement, you're crossing over, you're kind of conflicting with the intersection traffic at that point, and we agree that it's a much safer driveway to just limit it to a right in, right out. So the only full-service driveway then is the one that's all the way to the western front, and there's a dedicated left turn lane in, but if you can also make a left turn out there? Are you
yes.
going into the dedicated, is it one of those like, turn, do you know what I mean?
Two-way
The
left
mid-
turn lane. Yeah, no, we're not proposing a two-way left turn lane. When the township, when they design the driveway for the park opposite, they will have basically the exact mirror of, what we're proposing on the other side. So there will be a break in the striping, kind of in the middle of that. So
yeah.
they will not be turning into what we would call a suicide lane or a
Yeah.
two-way left turn lane.
I didn't know if that was the technical term for it. Okay, so I just was curious because it would seem then that is a left turn out in opposed to, in addition to the Thames lane. So I just wanted to see what the lefts looked like out.
Correct.
Okay, no other comments from the board? Are you still good? No? You want to go out? Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll have the public comments on the traffic report. We're calling the meeting back to order. Where is the applicant? There he is. Okay, do you want to call your next witness?
Can we announce the other one
Oh.
carried, just in case?
Okay, let me, where's my app, where's my, whatever. Okay, when are you going? When are you going to go to?
October 30th?
Okay, if anyone is here for American Plaza, Block 21002 Texas Road, that application will be continued and will be heard on the 30th? October 30th.
We're not going to reach it this evening, so rather than have everybody stay for the rest of the evening knowing we're not going to get to it, we're just going to adjourn it now. October 30th, there won't be any additional notice. This is your notice.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yes. What?
He was waiting for American Plaza, so he wants to be excused.
Bye. Okay, so I think we can, oh, no, we need the public. Public. Anybody from the public on traffic? Yes. Just on traffic.
What?
Just on the test.
Well, you were left over from the other, but are you talking about traffic or something else?
A little of both. I'll try my best.
We'll give you a little leeway because you
All right.
didn't get called over.
Dan Devanzo, 4 Excalibur Court. And just to continue on that, the drive exit down on the south there on Thames, again, you heard someone from Society Hill speak about it, how it could really damage as far as what we do on a development on a daily basis. People walk their dogs, people with babies, talk about safety. You have someone on the, Mr. Pink says the same thing. Is there really a need for it? The amount of people that are going to make that left, make a right to make a left and continue Cottrell South might be a handful a day. Is it really worth upsetting a whole development? I mean, we're taxpayers, meet us halfway. That's all we're asking. If this gets approved, so be it. All right, but kind of try and put yourselves in our shoes and try and just your best to just get rid of that drive exit. That's all we ask. And also, can you just clarify as far as if this does get approved, what's the hours of operation as far as when construction could be held?
Do you know what hours? I think it's just during the week, right?
There's actually a noise ordinance in town, so it would be from 7 a.m. to, I believe, during the weekdays, 4 p.m. But there are restriction on heavy machinery and equipment that can be used. That's Monday through Friday. There's a different restriction on a Saturday, and Sunday there's no work.
All right, so you're talking 6 days a week, pretty much. 6 days a week, all right. And also, can you clarify, again, there's a ton of trees in that designed area. How are they going to get rid of those trees? Are they going to plow them underneath? Are they just getting rid of them? What's the process for the removal? Because now we're talking about termites. So what are we doing with the trees? how we getting rid of them?
I'm going to defer to the landscape architect. He's going to testify.
He'll be
to
the
that.
next witness.
All right, we'll have him address that in the next.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, traffic. With the fellow behind you, please, because he hasn't had a chance.
I'll be quick. So just to clarify,
you-
Lawrence Romney.
You have to give your name and
Lawrence
address.
Romney, 377 Minstrel, directly affected by Building A. My backyard is now apparently going to be a brick wall. One of the best parts about buying that property, just so everyone understands, it was a beautiful sanctuary. It was wooded. It was every species of bird you could possibly imagine. Now, from what I understand, it's going to be a brick wall. Curious to know how tall that building is going to be for Building A. And then maybe a better question for you or the gentleman that was up before.
Chuck's not in here. Jeremy, do you know?
He did testify to it, but I don't specifically recall.
Is it a one-story? Is it two-story?
The architect can provide that when they're going to go get him, but he'll be able to answer that.
All right, no worries. So coming out of Cottrell, I heard two conflicting stories about the traffic flow coming out of the driveway. Is it going to be right turn only going northbound on Cottrell, or will they have the option to go left and right?
No, so the access that is directly on Cottrell, and again, I'm sorry if I blind you with the laser pointer. So this driveway along Cottrell will be limited to only the northbound right turn movement, and then just the right turn coming out of the driveway.
So the people that are concerned about why they would need that little fire lane or whatever it is, the answer is, if you were to be coming south from Cottrell, going north, going into the development to get back home, you would, one of two things, either have to go out that entrance, make a right and then a left and go through the existing space, or go all the way around and come all the way around Thames and to get to that spot. So that's, I don't like it there, but that's the technical reason why it's there.
Yes,
So
that
I
is
get
the
that.
idea behind it.
Okay, so I do have questions about the parking in the bottom of Building A. I heard something about a 10-foot exception or something along those lines. Let me check my sophisticated notes here. 10-foot waiver on the bottom of A for parking that wasn't going to be immediate. I don't know if that's
So
something.
what the applicant was proposing, that if 3 additional spaces are needed, they would be tandem spaces. They'd be back-to-back
3.
spaces for employees.
Okay.
They're not going to be, again, as Jeremy testified, they will not be constructed when the center opens. They are there for, if needed, future use. So when the center opens, the day it opens, you will not see these 3 additional spaces.
The 2 garbage places are going to be so close to each other. Any garbage that's for the entire development is going to go to those 2 dumpsters, which are, the southwest corner of Building A and the southeast corner of Building B. So regardless of the restaurant, forget about the garlic smell, which I happen to love, but the garlic smell at night that you get with Ponte Vecchio, all the garbage is literally going to be in my backyard. So just keep that under consideration, that you've got this entire development. I'm sure you can find a better place for at least one of those. Keep the paper shredded garbage behind my place, but at the end of the day, I'm sure with all the different areas, you can carve out another place for it. Put it near the fire lane where no one's going to go, according to your statistics. So that's that.
The architect's here if you want to hear the response to your question.
The height of Building
Why don't
A,
we wait?
Chuck. Building A.
30 feet is the maximum height at the mansard roofs in the towers.
Do they plan on doing the maximum height? Okay, so my backyard's now going to be a 30-foot brick wall, which is literally outside from what, if I...
Not what the back elevation looks like.
No, and look, everyone has a business.
All right, well,
I get it.
why don't we wait until he shows his stuff, and then you can...
Understood. And look, everyone's got a job to do, everyone's got money to make, I get it. But at the end of the day, there's 6 people directly affected by Building A, and probably most affected by the entire development, just throwing it out there. If we're going to be disrupted, and this is more of a personal thing, if we're going to be disrupted with this whole development, I heard something about a flagpole getting rejected. You got to put a flagpole up. I mean, geez, come on, what are we talking about? You know, if you're gonna change my backyard from a beautiful scenery to a 30-foot potential brick wall, let me see the American flag, please. That's all I'm asking. That's all I.
All right, thank you.
Just to
I
respond
thought
to...
didn't they relocate the dumpster?
They did.
Where is it now? It's further away, right?
Yeah. It was where the tandem parking spaces were proposed. Now it's shifted to the other side of that area, that one. And the flagpole, the applicant has no issue putting the flagpole in. The problem was it was too close to the road. It would require the variance, but we could look at that again.
Okay. Yes, just gentlemen, then I'll come back to you.
Jay Weiss, 175 Bristol Court. Your surveys, your traffic surveys, I'd like to know when they were done. Were they done during the school times, during when the high school buses were going? Was, in the summer, in the winter, when were they actually done?
Sure. So the traffic counts were conducted on Thursday, February 22nd of this year, and Saturday, February 24th. We counted actually, typically when we're counting, we count 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., which would encompass the weekday evening, like the PM rush hour, everybody getting home. However, because of the proximity of the schools and the government buildings and kind of everything in this area, we did decide to count from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. to kind of, again, capture that high school traffic, capture the school traffic. And again, I did check the weather for that day. I looked back historically. We don't count when it snows or rains or anything like that. And it was a 56-degree day in the end of
So
February.
you didn't do the morning into the schools when all the buses are on 516 and Cottrell going to the high school? You didn't do morning surveys?
We did not do the morning, typically because a shopping center does not generate, a shopping center of this with the retail stores or restaurants would not generate a high number of morning traffic.
People going to work do, in the school, in the store, people going to the stores, because I work in a store, people going to a store go in the mornings, away from that.
Okay.
On the exit onto 516, the rightmost exits, you have an exit from the development going just near there, making the left-hand turn onto 516. You're telling us now, you're putting in a turn lane going westbound on 516 to turn into the shopping center that is going to come back into where we have to make the left onto that. When we come out of our development to go on the eastbound side, on the westbound side, we'd actually have to turn into that turn lane. Has anybody looked into that? And the traffic that would back up into us, we have a hard time making that left now, making that then. Also, the exit onto Thames, has anybody looked at the traffic coming from the other shopping center? You're now you're now bringing in more cars coming in to make that left when people coming down Cottrell can't make a left into the development because of the people coming out of the other. Now you're creating even more traffic.
Yes,
there.
that was all considered in our traffic study. We counted
At rush hours? At both rush hours?
No, just the PM and the Saturday midday, which is what we studied for our traffic study.
Which is leaving half of the day off the records. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Michael Anderson, 304 Pewter again. Going back to the times that you said you did the study, I see that the mornings were not done, the AM rush, and I heard your explanation. But anybody who has kids and knows anything about schools knows one thing. Most of the time, most schools start around the same time, 8:15-ish, pretty much around there. Dismissal times vary by elementary, by intermediates. Teachers all basically have to be in around the same time, but they leave at different times. So to me, by not doing the AM rush, you're conveniently missing the most important part of the busiest part of the day. Do you agree that the AM rush is probably busier than the PM rush?
Not for our shopping center. I don't disagree with the general flow of the roadways, but for a shopping center, if I were to generate, again, in the same manual that we use to generate the traffic, I can tell you that the AM traffic generated by a development of this size per ITE is significantly less during the AM peak than it is for the PM or Saturday, which is why we studied the PM or Saturday.
As far as the dates, you guys came with this proposal back in August was the first time we heard it. Was there a reason why the study was done in February? I'm wondering if the board would consider doing another traffic study, maybe around this time when it's a little bit busier. I mean, I know what you're saying about the weather, but anybody who has kids knows when the winter comes, usually you try to keep the kids indoors. You really don't try to do too much. Just because one day, all of a sudden in the winter, it's a beautiful 56 degrees, people still don't go out. Is there a reason why maybe the township can do another traffic study, but maybe do it at a peak time of the season, not February, maybe October or November? This is really up for the board. I mean, would you guys consider doing another traffic study during a different time other than February?
I don't know, can our traffic consultant comment on that?
Deanna Drum for the record. Typically in traffic impact studies for something like this, you typically want to count during the school year. So we're talking probably mid-September to probably early June, even the end of May. You do see seasonal fluctuations in traffic, especially around Christmas time. It's a lot higher. But generally speaking, in February, when school's in session, you're outside, holidays, and it's still, relatively decent weather, you typically will get an average day. You may count in October, it may be slightly higher, but the end, it's not going to overly affect the end result of a traffic study. I did take a look at some of the information they have, and they did some, what I want to call hourly and daily traffic collection on Cottrell Road, and the morning peak is actually about 100 trips lower than the afternoon peak. Not just giving you that more for information. So for them doing it in February, I do think it's appropriate for this type of development. If it was early January, late December, or even in November with all the holidays that go on, it may be I may have a different conclusion, but I'm satisfied with February.
When you're talking about the peak, you're talking about the amount of vehicles?
Correct.
Because a car is a lot different than a bus.
No.
So,
Well, no.
buses, you may not have as many vehicles, but the buses are carrying a lot more children and it's carrying a lot more space and a lot more to the ozone layer. So I understand what you're saying. Maybe the AM rush, it's a little smaller, but if you have 10 buses backed up on 516, that's going to be a lot less than 10 cars backed up. So I think that's what the concern with a lot of residents is that we try to come out of our complex, we try to make a left, we can't make the left. And I think that's really what the concern is. So I know what you're saying about there may be less vehicles, but look at the vehicles that are on the road at that time. So I think that's really what our concern is. I think that's why we really want to do a study, because you need to see how backed up the traffic is getting, not the amount of cars that are on the road. And you see it even by the municipal center when you're coming down Cottrell, when you're coming from north of 516, you could see that sometimes you have to wait 4 or 5 traffic lights before you can make that right turn. So again, that's I think what we're trying to say is that the traffic is just getting so backed up and you're going to be adding more traffic to it. Another question I have is when you come out of our complex, like people have said, to make a left turn is already pretty difficult. Now, according to Ms. Shapiro and Jeremy, they want to make those driveways with Cottrell Farms and the other one aligned. So that's going to be 2 entrances, one to the park, one to the shopping center. And then not too far away is going to be our entrance. Would you say that that's pretty close together to have all these cars making lefts and right turns? I mean, is there any way we can move that driveway from the right of Building B? I mean, can we eliminate it? Or, I mean, you're looking at a lot of entrances.
I can tell you that the spacing distance required by the state of New Jersey or Middlesex County or any of the higher agencies, we are well in excess of what those spacing distances between driveways would be required. So, this is a typical situation. Again, we're following what the regulations are. And, it's not going to, I think what I'm trying to say is that we are, again, following the state, following the county, and it's a typical situation
But
for
when-
New Jersey.
But are they considering the driveway that we're coming out from, it's a townhouse development with well over 100 houses? Is that being compared to like another townhouse development that has, I don't know, 10 houses in it? I mean, you're talking a lot of traffic in this complex. We're not talking about 10 townhouses. We're talking well over 100 townhouses. I mean, you got to understand the traffic that's coming out. 383, thank you. 383 townhouses are going to be coming out of there. That's exit is awfully close to where you're going to have people coming in and out from Control Farms eventually and from the other one. So basically you're saying there's no way that they would consider moving because of the traffic, even though there'd be excess traffic.
I mean, I don't see how moving the driveway is going to change the traffic that's coming out of the townhouse development.
It would make it easier for us to try to get in and out.
But
I mean,
you're
if
saying that it's
coming- if
already
you're coming-
an existing problem.
And you're going to be compounding that problem by adding more traffic there.
Again, we feel that our design, we're providing what the county is requiring, and we feel that it's in a optimal location as far as the distance from the existing intersection. We're not interfering with the turn lanes of the intersection, so, you know, we don't want to move it any further west, and we feel that it's in an optimal location for our site.
Okay. And Ms. Cannon, this is not the traffic, but just to get back to what he was referring to about the
Yeah,
garbage
we-
dumpsters. No, because I just want to make sure you're clear. When he was talking about the dumpsters being moved, yes, that first dumpster was being moved a little bit over more towards the left. But I think his point was even that second dumpster, look how close that second dumpster is to the first dumpster. I think that's what his complaint was, is that originally, yes, the first dumpster was a little closer to him and they did move it out and that was great. But then they took the second dumpster, which was in the middle of like B and C. Now it's all the way to the right of B. So I think his complaint about the dumpsters being moved is that, yeah, one of them was being moved away, but the other one was moved a lot closer. And now look where those two dumpsters are compared to Minstrel. So I think that's what his, complaints. I just wanted to clarify that that's what he was referring to, because I don't know if you understood what he meant.
All right, thank
Okay?
you. Okay. Yeah. Where is the other dumpster? Losing track of the dumpsters.
Hi, I'm Amanda Martore. I live at 11 Excalibur Court. I just had a couple of concerns in regards to traffic when you speak about tractor trailers making a delivery. So if a little over 10,000 of your 30-some odd thousand square feet is going to be for restaurants, that's approximately a third of the business. So if a third of your businesses are for restaurants, I work for a beverage distribution company. We deliver on tractor trailers. How are you going to lease out these businesses without allowing tractor trailers to come in to then compensate for that possible traffic?
Again, we're going to have to defer to the applicant as far as what the leasing restrictions would be.
Because working for a beverage company, we only deliver on tractor trailers. So if a third of your businesses, a third of them are going to have tractor trailer deliveries. My other question is, I heard about the walkways and the walkways in the front. I know people do walk from our current Society Hill across the street to the other plaza, and I guess that's the design, is that people will continue to walk across the street. Is there going to be any kind of walkway with the other entrance coming this way in terms of safety, if we're going to have more traffic, to have something there, some kind of walkway for safety?
As far as across Cottrell?
Yeah, across Cottrell by Thames, or would everyone just be assumed to walk up to the corner light down and back around?
At this point, we're not proposing any crosswalk at Thames or, a kind of a cross, like a mid-block crossing across Cottrell. They would be using the pedestrian accommodations. There are pedestrian push buttons and kind of that flash, the...
So they'd have to go to the end?
Yes, they would have to go to the signalized intersection.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay, we're going to go to the next, we'll close the public portion and go to the next witness.
Right.
Do you want this? Oh, good. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
No.
Swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
It's Raymond C. Liotta, Liotta.
And Mr. Liotta, you're going to be providing testimony as a landscape architect and as a planner, is that correct?
Yes, that
Would you
is
place
correct.
your credentials on the record,
Yes.
please?
I have a degree in landscape architecture from Rutgers University. I've been a licensed landscape architect since 1985. I'm also a licensed planner by examination since 1988. I've testified in both capacities in over 75 different municipal jurisdictions, and I've testified here many, many times.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and start with a member of the public, before I forget, asked about the tree removal and what happens to the debris after it's removed. You want to answer that first?
Yes, what happens nowadays is when a developer removes trees from a site, they do a clearing and grubbing operation, and they remove the trees. They basically lumber the trees out, and then they remove all the stumps and they grub all the roots and everything out of the development area. And they don't leave anything on site anymore. They don't bury anything anymore. It's not permitted to do that because there were circumstances years ago where sinkholes developed and people got injured or killed. So that's not what happens now. So the wood and the landscape material that's removed gets taken off site.
Okay, start with, if you don't mind, landscaping and lighting, and then you can go into the variances.
Yes. Well, let me talk a little bit about the landscape plan. Dawn, if we could put the landscape rendering up.
And that's going to be,
Now, this is a new exhibit.
it'll be A12 when you get to it.
And that exhibit is now up on the screen. It's called Control Road Development Landscape Exhibit, and it has a date of October 2nd, 2018. This is essentially a rendered or a colored version of the landscape plan. Let me walk you through what some of the color symbols are on the plan. The lighter green area that's at the south end of the property is the existing wetland area, and it's bordered by a dark dashed line that I'm highlighting. The other darker green area around the perimeter of the existing wetland area is the wetland buffer area and other wooded area that's going to remain once the development portion of the site gets developed. So everything that's in green, which is to the south and east and west of the development pieces, is all existing wooded area that would remain subsequent to development. And as you can see, the developed portion of the site is pushed westward along Cottrell Road, up against Cottrell Road, and a slim portion of the developable area along Old Bridge Turnpike, Old Bridge Mattawan Road, Route 516. So it's a fairly distinct difference between what is being developed and what isn't. The undeveloped portion, which is the existing wooded portion that's going to remain, is approximately 58% of the site, and the developed portion of the site is approximately 42%. Now, in terms of the landscape plan, we followed and complied with the town center district requirements for various components within the regulations, and that deals with paving types and paving patterns, both along Route 516 and Control Road. That also includes street trees, which are inserted into tree grates and specialized tree pits that has a structural soil within the tree pits so that the paving material is stable on top of the areas where the trees are going to be inserted into the streetscape. The tree spacing is consistent with the requirements in the town center district requirements. Parking lot trees are proposed throughout the parking lot in the areas where we have landscape islands. For the number of parking spaces in this plan, it requires 14 parking lot trees. We do have 14 trees that are either within landscape islands in the parking lot or immediately adjacent to the parking lot, both along Cottrell Road, near the exit onto Thames, and throughout the rest of the property. However, as indicated in the staff report, we do need a design waiver because the parking row along the southern end of the development portion, south of Building B and south of Building C, does not have a landscape island in it where we're not able to put a tree into that parking row. However, because of the way that the retaining wall design is being implemented here, it's a sheet piling system that basically is going to parallel that parking lot and developed graded portion of the site. And it's able to be inserted in very close proximity to the existing wooded area that we're going to keep in the plant. So there's an extensive wooded area that's immediately adjacent to all of this parking where there is not a landscape island. So there'd be tree canopy and existing wooded area immediately adjacent to the parking. We feel that meets the intent of the ordinance. We also have plaza and courtyard areas that are being introduced both along Route 516 and Cottrell. There's a courtyard area at the corner of Cottrell and Route 516. You heard some discussion about the rain garden area that's being introduced between Building B and Building C. The rain garden area is doing a couple of different things with that design. It's going to be intercepting some water and infiltrating it into the ground and doing some water quality treatment, as well as it's beautifying and dressing up that area in just east of Building C. So that little plaza area will have a landscape amenity immediately adjacent to it. And it's also screening the parking spaces that are on the north side of the proposed drive aisle between Buildings C and B from Cottrell Road. So that rain garden area will be screening the parking spaces from Route 516. We have added an evergreen hedgerow along the eastern property line directly behind Building A. That was discussed as a recommendation at the last hearing, and we have done that. And then to the east of that hedgerow, evergreen hedgerow on the property line, we are proposing a solid 6-foot vinyl fence to also supplement the screening along that property line. In addressing one of the staff comments with respect to street trees in the area of a new site triangle easement at Cottrell Road, we may have to either relocate or remove 1 or 2 trees at the intersection so that they do not land inside that site triangle easement, but that will be something that we will do as part of a resolution compliance type item should the board approve the application. We've also added street furniture along Route 516 in the form of benches and trash receptacles, and then we've also added benches and bike racks within the site itself. And in terms of the plant materials that we utilized for the plan, it's a combination of deciduous, evergreen trees, shrubs, and ground covers that are all common to this hardiness zone and typical for the commercial setting that we're proposing here. So they're all hardy plants that you commonly see in this township. That's all of my testimony with respect to the landscape plan, and I could take questions on that if you have them at this time, or I could just finish with the lighting, which will only take a few minutes, and then we could talk about both.
Just do the.
Okay. All right, in terms of the lighting plan, we also, again, followed the town center district requirements with respect to the type of light, the decorative lighting fixture, and the spacing and the illumination requirements based on ordinance and addressing comments in a previous staff memo. So the fixtures themselves are not exactly as indicated in the town center district, but what we did was we matched the fixtures that were built and constructed on the existing town center site across the street from us on Cottrell and 516. So we'll have the same exact fixture style and pole style and spacing as shown on that development. With respect to a comment that staff had for a lighting fixture that for lighting at the intersection of Thames Drive and the exit driveway, staff had suggested that we light that intersection up a little bit more than we have in the current plan. We have a fixture close to that intersection now, but what we felt was that if we illuminated that sidewalk and the intersection between the driveway and the edge of pavement on Thames to a minimum level meeting industry standards, that would be better than to add additional light into that intersection. However, if the board feels that we should comply with the staff comment, what we'll need to do then is move that light fixture that's in this area near the Thames Drive a little bit closer to the driveway exit, and that will illuminate the sidewalk a little bit better. And that's essentially it for the lighting. So we have installed lighting fixtures throughout the entire project, and the illumination levels meet the minimums and the averages as required by the ordinance and addressing comments in the recent staff report.
Okay, Bina, did you?
Just one question. The evergreen hedge along the easterly property line, can you specify the height and how tall they grow when they are at their full heights for the benefit of the residents?
That is an arborvitae evergreen tree. They're being spaced very close together, approximately 6 feet on center, and they're being installed at an 8-foot height initial installation. They will typically grow within a 10-year period to roughly 20 feet or 25 feet tall.
And the building height is 30 feet, correct?
I believe that's correct.
All right, that's it.
Now, I know that the architect did testify to this at the last time, but he did submit a revised drawing that does show an improvement to the facade on that eastern side of Building A, so it's not just a blank wall that you're seeing. He has dressed that eastern facade up of Building A.
Nicole, did you have anything?
The lighting comment that I had at the exit driveway on Thames was that, not to add additional lighting, but there's actually existing lighting on the roadway that if you added it to your calculations, do you meet the lighting requirements on that sidewalk at that location? So I wasn't saying to add more lights, just incorporate the existing lights to show that the criteria is being met.
Yeah, the existing light is shown on the plan, but unfortunately, we weren't able to identify the kind of light it is or the bulb power, essentially, the wattage of the light, so we could not model that in. So in all likelihood and probability, the lighting levels that we're showing on our plan will be higher. But it would certainly be easy enough for us to move the proposed fixture on the Thames exit driveway a little bit closer so that it does increase the sidewalk to about a half a foot candle without considering the Thames light.
That would be acceptable.
Okay, the board, does anybody have any questions regarding this testimony? Yes, Mr. Biscotti?
Just a simple question. Whose responsibility to empty the garbage cans along the property on the outer edge?
It's my understanding it's the developer's responsibility.
Thank you.
Are the arborvitae, is that a very hardy tree?
Arborvitae, yes.
Ones I've seen are.
We specifically actually picked a species that is extremely deer tolerant and very thick growth habit, so it will develop into a solid screen.
Okay, anybody else? Oh, Mr. Lauer?
The trees on Cottrell Road, how big will they get in the future?
Yeah, all of the trees on both Cottrell Road and Route 516 are the sycamore type that are required within the development guidelines. And they then will match the trees that are on the opposite side of Cottrell that are shown in the existing development. Those trees typically in this type of setting, based on its context, might get 35 or 40 feet tall over a 10-year period.
And they'll be maintained by the owner of the property?
I believe that's correct, yes.
And the canopy, how wide would the canopy get?
You could expect a tree like that to get a canopy of 30 to 40 feet at a 10-year growth cycle.
Okay, and that won't interfere with the traffic on Cottrell Road?
No. All of the trees are required to be limbed up above 8 feet above any sidewalks or roadway contact areas.